All right. Good morning. How is everyone today? Good? Good. Okay, today we are going to read through chapter 15 of Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. If this is your first time watching, we are not just merely going to read through each word, but we are going to stop and look at words that might be interesting, vocabulary words that you probably don't know, or phrases that maybe aren't so clear if you are not a native speaker of the English language. If you're watching this live with me, then I really do want you to ask questions in the comments. That makes it more interesting to watch, and it makes it more educational, which is the purpose of this. If you don't ask questions, I will just identify words I think you don't know, or phrases I think that maybe are not clear. All right, so let's get started with chapter 15 of Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. The menial staff of the Park Lane Hospital for the Dying consisted of 162 deltas divided into two Bokanovsky groups of 84, red-headed female, and 78 dark dolicephalic male twins. Okay. Well, in case you don't know what menial means, it means like low. We better get the or lesser, maybe. I'm thinking of the Latin word like menos, meaning less, but let's see. Menial. Not requiring much skill or lacking prestige. I just want to see, now I want to see the origin of it. I have to test my theory to see if it's related to menos. Let's see, menial. Oh, actually, it's an old French word, Anglo-French, menial, meaning related to the house. Oh, that's interesting. So housework. I guess it used to mean housework. Coming from the same word as mansion or maison. That's interesting. Okay. Well, anyway, it's not a very nice way to say lesser work, like being a cleaner or picking up garbage in the street. You would call this menial work, but you have to be careful because I think it could sound a little bit insulting these days to use that word. Although I don't know if it's meant to be that way. Okay, so the menial staff. That means like the cleaners, probably mostly cleaners. Let's see. For the Dying consisted of 162 deltas divided into two Bokanovsky groups of 84, red-headed female. My mother was a redhead. Does that mean that she was a delta? A menial delta? And 78 dark dolichocephalic. Okay, when you see cephalus, that always means like brain or head. But let's find out what dolichocephalus means. Dolichocephalus. Let's see. Dolichocephalic. An abnormality of the skull shape characterized by increased anterior-posterior diameter. So in other words, a very big head. Let's see if we can find a picture of that. So this is dolichocephalic. Not that it's a word that we need to know, but just for the context of the story. This is dolichocephalic. A big head. All right, so the menial staff of the Park Lane Hospital for the Dying consisted of 162 deltas, divided into two Bokanovsky groups of 84 red-headed female and 78 dark dolichocephalic male twins, respectively. At 6, when their working day was over, the two groups assembled in the vestibule of the hospital and were served by the deputy sub-bursar with their soma ration. If you were reading 1984 with me, which we read right before this book, ration is sometimes something is limited, maybe because of a war or something, usually because of a war. Some resources could be limited, like gas or food. And what happens in these circumstances is the government says, okay, well, you're only allowed to fill your gas tank one time per week. Each person has the right to fill their gas tank once per week, but not more. And that is a ration of gas. So these menial laborers get a ration of soma. They're allowed a limited amount of soma every week. From the lift, the savage stepped out into the midst of them, but his mind was elsewhere, with death, with his grief, and his remorse. Remember, his mother just died in the previous chapter. But she wasn't even thinking of him as he died. She was thinking about, because she was on this soma drug, so she was thinking about having sex with her favorite person back in the village and having a wonderful time in her head, and her son was feeling bad holding her hand as she was dying, but she didn't even notice him, which made him very angry. But his mind was elsewhere, with death, with his grief, and his remorse. Mechanically, without consciousness of what he was doing, he began to shoulder his way through the crowd. So these are your shoulders right here, and I guess shouldering his way through the crowd means pushing people aside. He was doing it mechanically, like a machine. He just did it automatically. He wasn't thinking about how rude maybe he was being. Who are you pushing? Where do you think you're going? High, low, from a multitude of separate throats. Only two voices squeaked, squeak. That's the sound. The sound of a mouse is a squeak. Beep, beep. And growled. And the sound of a growl is like an angry dog. That's a growl. Repeated indefinitely. As though by a train of mirrors, two faces, one a hairless and freckled, moon-haloed in orange, and the other a thin-beaked bird mask, stubbly with 2 days' beard, turned angrily towards him. So, let's see. Well, he's saying it's like being in a hall of mirrors because everybody's a twin. So he's very unique looking, but besides him, there are only two other faces that you can see. And one is a moon face. Let's see if we can find a picture of a moon face. Jay Leno has a moon face. I don't know if you know who Jay Leno is, but wait, let's see. I think Google won't do it. They're too polite these days to do something like that, I think. But here's when you talk about a moon face, you sort of imagine this shaped face. Let's find a picture of Jay Leno profile. Jay Leno. He's a very famous person, or was a very famous person. See, he has a moon face. That's a moon face. But Google actually won't show a moon face if you Google moon face, because they edit their searches now. Okay, let's see. And freckles. I don't know if you know what freckles are, so we better take a look at some freckles. These are freckles. So I think my mother was a Delta 4 because she had red hair and freckles. What does that make me? These are freckles. Oh, and wait, let's see. We've got one, a hairless and freckled moon haloed in orange. Well, let me show you what a halo is, but I'm not really sure. Oh, haloed in orange may be like having orange hair. Well, let me show you what a halo is. Oh no, because it's a video game. A halo is like a ring of light above your head. Let's see, halo painting. So you can see in these paintings like this icon, maybe this is a Greek or Russian icon. The person has a halo. This is another example of a halo. So if this person is haloed in orange, it must mean that they have like some hair, like right around here in a big circle. I think that's what it means. Let's see. But it's strange because it says a hairless and freckled moon haloed in orange. Maybe hairless in the sense that it's a man and he doesn't have any hair on his face, whiskers, or maybe on his body. But he is haloed in orange, so probably he has some orange hair. Let's see. One, a hairless and freckled moon haloed in orange, with the other, a thin-beaked bird mask, stubbly with 2 days' beard, turned angrily towards him. So, let's see. Bird beak face. A beak, that's what birds have. Birds do not have lips. Birds have something hard here for their mouths. That's called a beak. So if anything, let's see, we can at least see what, so you see this beautiful blue bird? The beak is the black part. So instead of lips, a bird has a beak. And have you ever seen somebody who looks like a bird? They have like a bird beak instead of a normal face. They didn't really show it here. But I know what they're talking about. Unfortunately, they just don't show pictures of that sort of thing. Does she have a bird beak face? Wait, let's see. I don't know. You would think that maybe her face would pop out more for it to be a bird beak face. Okay, well, you get the idea, I guess. I suppose. Their words, and in his ribs, the sharp nudging. This is nudging. Especially because it says here, this is the elbow right here, and nudging means like a small movement. So actually, in a lot of software programs, if you want to move, like in some image making software, if you just want to move an object like one little point, you have to nudge it. Usually that's by hitting the arrow key. And it's called nudge because nudge is just a small movement. But when you nudge someone with your elbow, you're doing this. The sharp nudging of elbows broke through his unawareness. So he's walking through, shouldering people like this, and people are doing this to him, and he's saying, "Huh? Why are people doing? Oh, I'm being a jerk." He woke once more to external reality, looked round him, knew what he saw, knew it with a sinking sense of horror and disgust for the recurrent delirium of his days and nights, the nightmare of swarming, indistinguishable sameness. Twins. Oh, Heesuk Jones says hello from Seoul. Hello, Heesuk. Sorry I didn't see your message earlier. I had the messages covered up with something else, and I just realized that. I said, oh no, what if people are asking questions I can't see? Okay. Twins like maggots. We saw that word yesterday, maggots, but in case you weren't here yesterday, let's take a look at a maggot. These are maggots. So he says twin because everybody's a twin. They're just two types of people walking down the hallway, and it's annoying. So he says twins, maggots. The nightmare of swarming indistinguishable sameness. Twins like maggots, they had swarmed defilingly over the mystery of Linda's death. Maggots again, but larger, full grown. They now crawled across his grief and his repentance. Repentance is when you feel bad that you did something and you want people to forgive you. So he feels bad about something and he wants forgiveness. Maybe because he was angry with her as she was dying. Maybe he feels bad about that and wants her forgiveness. But dead people can't really forgive you. He halted and, with bewildered and horrified eyes, stared round him at the khaki mob, in the midst of which, overtopping it by full head, he stood. How many goodly creatures are there here? The singing words mocked him derisively. How beauteous mankind is, O brave new world! Soma distribution, shouted a loud voice. In good order, please. Hurry up there. The people want their drugs. A door had been opened, a table and chair carried into the vestibule. The voice was that of a jaunty young alpha. Let's look at that word jaunty. I think to me jaunty means happy. I think we've had it before too, but I always forget these words. Having or expressing a lively, cheerful, and self-confident manner. Okay, that is not a typical word. So if you, it's okay to use that word. I think that you would be understood most of the time, but it's not an extremely common or typical word to use. The voice was that of a jaunty young alpha who had entered carrying a black iron cash box. A murmur of satisfaction went up from the expectant twins. They forgot all about the savage. Their attention was now focused on the black cash box, which the young man had placed on a 4-hour day. But that doesn't make any sense. Their attention was now focused on the black cash box, which the young man had placed on 4-hour day. I don't know what that means, on 4-hour day. What was the result? Unrest and a large increase in the consumption of soma. Maybe what they're saying is usually these people work 8 hours or 12 hours, but today is a special day of 4 hours, and that's why they are given this drug at the end of the day. So it's their day to relax, because it says, what was the result? Unrest and a large increase in the consumption of soma. Yay, today we only work 4 hours. Let's take some drugs. I think that's what it means, but it's phrased strangely to me. That was all. Those 3.5 hours of extra leisure. Yeah, so 3.5 hours of extra leisure. Leisure means to relax or to enjoy your time. So they were given 3.5 hours, which is almost 8 hours. If you include the time that they worked at 7.5 hours. So giving those extra 3.5 hours of leisure, of relaxed time, were so far from being a source of happiness that people felt constrained to take a holiday from them. So these people, they're used to working. And giving them this extra time just made them want drugs because they didn't know what to do with that extra time. Hadi says, good evening, Hadi. How are you doing tonight? The Inventions Office is stuffed with plans for labor-saving processes. Thousands of them. Mustafa Mond made a lavish gesture. A lavish gesture. He's always giving tours. So he's very proud of all the work they do. Thousands of them. One office is stuffed with plans for labor-saving processes. Thousands of them. Mustafa Mond made a lavish gesture. Let's take a look at that word. Lavish. Rich, elaborate, luxurious. Bestow something in a generous, extravagant quantities. So he's very proud of his process, and he makes a lavish gesture. Look at them all. The Inventions Office is stuffed with plans for labor-saving processes. Thousands of them. Mustafa Mond made a lavish gesture. And why don't we put them into execution? For the sake of the laborers, it would be sheer cruelty to afflict them with excessive leisure. I think that's the time we're heading to right now. Machines and computers can do everything, and robots can do everything. So we just have to employ people to keep them from trouble. Hadi is saying jaunty, blithe, mirthful. Yet the problem with all of those words is they're not very common. Usually people would just say happy, energetically, enthusiastically. Those are the words that people like now. So you could use these other words, but then sometimes people won't understand you very well because they're not so common. Now, then Hadi is asking vestibule and threshold. You know, threshold, it's just that space between two places. So a threshold is a very small line that you can cross from going from one room to another room. So it kind of means like edge. But actually vestibule is like an entrance room. It's a room before the room. So it's like if you walk into a house, the first room that you enter, depending on the design of your house, is usually a vestibule. It's like an area. You know, vestir means to get dressed. So that's the place. Like that's like the room where maybe you take off your coat, or you put on your coat before you leave or before you enter. That's the vestibule. So that's a special room in a building or a house, the entry room. And threshold is just it's like a line that you cross. You're in room A, and then you cross the threshold, and now you're in room B. But vestibule is like an entry room. It's like a reception room. It's the same with agriculture. We could synthesize every morsel of food if we wanted to. Morsel means little piece. That's a useful word. That's a common word, morsel. Let's take a look at pictures of morsel. So I'm just Googling morsel to see what kind of pictures Google gives us. Well, these are not good. Okay, now you may have some experience with cookies. I don't know. It depends on where you live. But these are chocolate chips. These little pieces are called chocolate chips. If they're bigger than these little pieces that you see here, these little chocolate pieces, then you might call them morsels. So morsels are little pieces, but they're bigger than the chips, probably. So when you see something using the word morsel, it probably has something small, but it's not too small. Are you hungry? Do you want to eat? I'm not really hungry. Maybe I'll have a little morsel, like a little piece of food. Not too much. I'm just trying to see. So in this picture, I don't know what this is, but I would call the yellow pieces that are close to us, maybe I would call those morsels. Morsels of what? I don't know. But it just means little pieces. How are they using morsel here? It's the same with agriculture. We could synthesize every morsel of food. So every little piece of food we could make with machines or science. If we wanted to, but we won't. We prefer to keep a third of the population on the land for their own sakes, because it takes longer to get food out of the land than out of a factory. Besides, we have our stability to think of. We want to change. We don't want to change. Every change is a menace to stability. That's another reason why we're so chary of applying new inventions. Chary. Okay, now that is a new word for me. Chary. C-H-A-R-Y. Let's see what it means. Hadi asks, what is the meaning of the word cloistered as an adjective? Well, a cloister as a noun is like a little jail cell or something. That's usually like where nuns live, like women who devote themselves to God. That's what I think of when I think of the word cloister. So if you think about it, but maybe it could be used for men too. But for some reason, I just think of women. So these buildings, these are filled with women or men, maybe men too. But I think it's just women in a cloister. I have to look. But a lot of people live here, and they live in very small little rooms, maybe with just a bed, with very simple things. So it's almost like a prison cell. It's very isolated. You don't talk to other people. You're isolated, and then the idea is you're isolated, and you don't think about the rest of the world. You just think about God. And that's what a cloister is. So being cloistered means like being isolated. But let's see. Cloistered. Meaning. Let's just check. Yeah, so it means to keep away from the outside world, to be isolated. And it says monastery, so that could be for men too. So men or women who devote themselves to God put themselves in these isolated places where they don't see or talk to other people for a long time. And that's a cloister. And so to be cloistered means to be somebody keeps you away from the outside world, isolates you from the outside world. So a cloistered upbringing. That means that your parents kept you away from all the horrible people in the outside world. It's kind of like imprisoned, but I think if you use imprisoned, that sounds very negative. And cloistered sounds like you just had a very quiet, isolated life. You didn't meet many people. Oh, chary. We have to look up the word chary. Chary means cautious or suspicious, reluctant to do something. C-H-A-R-Y. I don't think you have to learn that word. I've never seen that word before in my life. But how do they use it? Let's go back. We prefer to keep a third of the population on the land for their own sakes, because it takes longer to get food out of them than out of a factory. Besides, we have our stability to think of. We don't want to change. Every change is a menace to stability. That's another reason why we're so chary of applying new inventions. So remember, chary means cautious, suspicious, reluctant. Every discovery in pure science is potentially subversive. Even science must sometimes be treated as a possible enemy. Yes, even science. Science, the savage frowned. He knew the word, but what it exactly signified he could not say. Shakespeare and the old men of the Pueblo had never mentioned science, and from Linda, he had only gathered the vaguest hints. Vague means very unclear. So from his mother, from Linda, who grew up in this society, he had some very unclear, very vague idea of what science was. Science was something you made helicopters with, something that caused you to laugh at the corn dances, something that prevented you from being wrinkled and losing your teeth. He made a desperate effort to take the controller's meaning. Yes, Mustafa Mond was saying, that's another item in the cost of stability. It's the only art that's incompatible with happiness. It's also science. Science is dangerous. We have to keep it more carefully chained and muzzled. Muzzle is... Let me show you a picture. It is part of the dog's face, or maybe, any animal's face. Well, actually... So if you have a dog that's very violent, sometimes they will put this cage on the face so the dog doesn't bite another person. And this is called a muzzle. But the reason it's called a muzzle is because this part of the animal is called a muzzle. So it's two things. It's this equipment, but also it's that part of the animal that comes out, like the nose. It's not really a nose, it's like a nose and a mouth together. So, but here they're talking about the object that you put on the face of an animal to prevent them from biting. So we have to keep science muzzled. People know about science, but we have to put that object on their face so they can't talk about it. They can't tell other people about it. We have to keep it secret. Science is dangerous. We have to keep it most carefully chained and muzzled. What? Said Helmholtz in astonishment. But we're always saying that science is everything. It's a hypnopedic platitude. 3 times a week between 13 and 17, put in Bernard. And in all science propaganda we do at the college. Yes, but what sort of science? Asked Mustafa Mond sarcastically. You have no scientific training. You can't judge. I was a pretty good physicist in my time. Too good. Good enough to realize that all our science is just cookery book. The whole point of science is that you're supposed to be able to analyze it and look at it and make a judgment for yourself. And in this book, they're saying, "Oh, what do you really know about science? You're no judge of science. You don't know what science is. So, gee, where have I heard that before?" I was a pretty good physicist in my time. Too good. Good enough to realize that all our science is just a cookery book with an orthodox theory of cooking that nobody's allowed to question, and a list of recipes that mustn't be added to except by special permission from the head cook. Wow, so even when this book was written 100 years ago, or almost 100 years ago, this system seems to be in place. science is like a cookbook. You follow the recipes made by the head cook, and you're not allowed to add anything or try any special recipes out. I'm the head cook now, but I was an inquisitive young scullion once. I started doing a bit of cooking on my own. Unorthodox cooking, illicit cooking, a bit of real science, in fact. He was silent. What happened? Asked Helmholtz Watson. The controller sighed. Very nearly what's going to happen to you, young man. I was on the point of being sent to an island. The words galvanized Bernard into a violent and unseemly activity. Send me to an island? He jumped up, ran across the room, and stood gesticulating. That means moving his arms or making gestures, making movements with his body, in front of the controller. You can't send me to an island. I haven't done anything. It was the others. I swear it was the others. He pointed accusingly to Helmholtz and the savage. Oh, please don't send me to Iceland. I promise I'll do what I ought to do. Give me another chance. Please give me another chance. The tears began to flow. I tell you, it's their fault, he sobbed. Sobbed is crying. And not to Iceland. Oh, please, your lordship, please. In a paroxysm of objection, he threw himself on his knees. Let's see what a paroxysm is. Paroxysm. A sudden attack or violent expression of a particular emotion or activity. So in a paroxysm of abjection. Okay, let's make sure we understand what abjection means. Condition of being servile, wretched, or contemptible. So Bernard is he's acting very pathetic and saying, oh, please, please don't send me to Iceland. And in a paroxysm of abjection, he threw himself on his knees before the controller. Mustafa moaned, tried to make him get up, but Bernard persisted in his groveling. The stream of words poured out inexhaustibly. In the end, the controller had to ring for his fourth secretary. Bring 3 men, he ordered, and take Mr. Marks into a bedroom, give him a good soma vaporization, and then put him to bed and leave him. The fourth secretary went out and returned with 3 green uniformed twin footmen. Still shouting and sobbing, Bernard was carried out. One would think he was going to have his throat cut, said the controller, as the door closed, whereas if he had the smallest sense, he'd understand that his punishment is really a reward. He's being sent to an island. That's to say, he's being sent to a place where he'll meet the most interesting set of men and women to be found anywhere in the world. All the people who, for one reason or another, have got too self-consciously individual to fit into community life. All the people who aren't satisfied with orthodoxy, who've got independent ideas of their own. Everyone, in a word, who's anyone. I almost envy you, Mr. Watson. I don't see what's so wrong with Iceland. If somebody said, I'm sending you away to Iceland, I'd say, okay. I could go. That's fine with me. Maybe they thought about it differently in the 30s. Because finally I preferred this, the controller answered, I was given the choice to be sent to an island where I could have got on with my pure science, or to be taken on to the controller's council with the prospect of succeeding in due course to an actual controllership. I chose this and let the science go. After a little silence, sometimes he added, I rather regret the science happiness I rather regret the science. Happiness is a hard master, particularly other people's happiness. As much harder master if one isn't conditioned to accept it unquestioningly than the truth. He sighed, fell silent again, and then continued in a brisker tone. Well, duty's duty. One can't consult one's own preferences. I'm interested in truth. I like science. But truth's a menace. Science is a public danger. As dangerous as it's been, beneficent. It has given us the stablest equilibrium in history. China's was hopelessly insecure by comparison. Even the primitive matriarchies weren't steadier than we are. Thanks, I repeat, to science. But we can't allow science to undo its own good work. That's why we so carefully limit the scope of its researches. So they're saying, once we've made our decision through science of what is good and what is bad, we can't allow science to contradict it or to tell us something different. I think I know people like this now. That's why we so carefully limit the scope of its researches. That's why I almost got sent to an island. We don't allow it to deal with any but the most immediate problems of the moment. All other inquiries are most sedulously discouraged. We better look at this word, sedulous. Let's see, sedulous. Sedulous, showing dedication and diligence. Again, this is not a word that you have to know. I just don't know what it means. All other inquiries are most sedulously discouraged. What is sedulous? Showing dedication. So very, very enthusiastically discouraged. It's curious, he went on after a little pause, to read what people in the time of our Ford used to write about scientific progress. They seem to have imagined that it could be allowed to go on indefinitely, regardless of everything else. Knowledge was the highest good, truth the supreme value, and all the rest were secondary and subordinate. True, ideas were beginning to change even then. Our Ford himself did a great deal to shift the emphasis from truth and beauty to comfort and happiness. Mass production demanded the shift. Universal happiness keeps the wheels steadily turning. Truth and beauty can't. And of course, whenever the masses seized political power, then it was happiness rather than truth and beauty that mattered. Still, in spite of everything, unrestricted scientific research was still permitted. People still went on talking about truth and beauty as though they were the sovereign goods. Right up to the time of the 9 Years' War. That made them change their tune, all right. What's the point of truth or beauty or knowledge when the anthrax bombs are popping all around you? That was when science first began to be controlled, after the 9 Years' War. People were ready to have even their appetites controlled then. Anything for a quiet life. We've gone on controlling ever since. It hasn't been very good for truth, of course, but it's been very good for happiness. One can't have something for nothing. Happiness has got to be paid for. You're paying for it, Mr. Watson, paying because you happen to be too much interested in beauty. I was too much interested in truth. I paid too. But you didn't go to an island, said the savage, breaking the long silence. The controller smiled. That's how I paid, by choosing to serve happiness. Other people's, not mine. It's lucky, he added after a pause, that there are such a lot of islands in the world. I don't know what we should do without them. Put you all in the lethal chamber, I suppose. Lethal means it will kill you. So if something is lethal, that means it will kill you. And he's saying, the Mustafa Mond is saying, I'm so happy that the Earth has a lot of islands, because what would we do with people like you if we didn't have all these islands where we could put you and separate you from the rest of the world? And he says, I guess we would have to put you in the lethal chambers. Chamber means room, and lethal means can kill you. So probably they put you in this room, and then who knows what happens. Some gas or something comes in, and it kills you. So that's what a lethal chamber is. By the way, Mr. Watson, would you like a tropical climate? The Marquesas, for example, or Samoa, or something rather more bracing? Helmholtz rose from his pneumatic chair. I should like it thoroughly, bad climate, he answered. I believe one would write better if the climate were bad, if there were a lot of wind and storms, for example. The controller nodded his approbation. That means his approval. I like your spirit, Mr. Watson. I like it very much indeed. As much as I officially disapprove of it, he smiled. What about the Falkland Islands? I would love to live in the Falkland Islands. I've been looking at those. I think that looks like a cool place, actually. I hope there are no Argentinians here. They'll say, Falkland Islands, how dare you? Yes, I think that will do, Helmholtz answered. And now, if you don't mind, I'll go and see how poor Bernard's getting on. That means how poor Bernard is doing. Okay. I think we probably just have 1 or 2 chapters left. So I'm going to do this the same time tomorrow, or around the same time, maybe a little bit earlier. Probably not later. I would like to do a little bit earlier, maybe, if I get up. It's very early here. It's just 7:30 in the morning. So I usually like to start this at 6:30 in the morning, sometime around there. All right, well, thank you, everybody who stayed and watched till the end. And we will read chapter 17 tomorrow at the same time. I hope to see you there. Thank you for all your questions and comments, and have a great day.